I'm going to introduce you guys to our special guest. A lot of you I know signed up for the call tonight because you know him. Dr. Frank. I have such an amazing feeling about Dr. Frank because Dr. Frank, his first stop was Pennsylvania, where I live. He kind of was the catapult into starting the organization that Tony Shoup and I founded, Auto the Vote PA. He is just a special place in my heart for Dr. Frank, but most of you know his background. He's a physicist, an inventor, a mathematician, an educator. But you know what? I think most of all, father, a husband, and a friend to so many of us who, we were just strangers 4 years ago, and now here we are, all just this amazing network. Like I said, I had the pleasure of meeting him back in, 2021, and he's been traveling ever since. Probably one of the biggest advocates Dr. Frank is for election integrity around the country, if not the world. He's given his talk, I am hearing, over 650 times, which is absolutely amazing. And I'm sure a lot of you have been able to see his presentation. So you know what, Dr. Frank, I'm going to give it to you. Have at it. We are so thankful that you're here with us tonight.
Thank you, Karen. I remember that first visit with you guys in Pennsylvania very fondly. And I remember I was still struggling with what my role was going to be in the movement because, I didn't know what I was doing, and you didn't, and none of us knew what we were doing. But I remember saying, look, they said, what do we have to pay you? And I said, nothing. I'll just drive up there. And you bought me dinner. So it wasn't free. You bought my dinner. And I followed that model for 4 years, essentially. Everybody that brought me in, I didn't charge ever. And I love that. And I love that I made that decision early on because it set me apart, too. There were a lot of bad players out there, and I didn't want to be associated with them. So it was nice. Boy, did I make a lot of friends. I have thousands of friends all over the country. And lo and behold, I ended up connecting to Mike, and then you guys all got connected in Mike Lindell. So it's good to be with you guys. It was an interesting time in my life for sure. Maybe one of the most exciting times of my life ever to travel around the country as much as I did. And been kind of a transition for me. I feel, and I never want to insult our veterans. It's like I relate at least a little bit to what it must be like for our military people who go away on a tour of duty and then they're gone for a long time and then they come home and then suddenly all those honeydews to catch up on. And I have been doing a lot of honeydews these last couple of weeks. Today I was at the hardware store buying 2x4s. So I am catching up on a lot of stuff. But it's been an interesting time of adjustment for me. I feel like I'm in this transition between that daily stuff, and I may be going back to that. In fact, I plan on it. I've been planning on it. I've been preparing new material, and I've been working very hard on some data in several counties around the country, but I don't want that to be public yet. I want that to remain private, because even though Trump won, we have a lot of cheating in our elections still and a lot of issues to deal with. But the difference is we're a different group of people today than we were 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we were still learning what to do and what our obligations were and how to do this stuff. Boy, are we experienced now. And so we know what we're doing a lot more than we used to. In fact, we know more than a lot of the election officials now. So we're stepping up and doing that work. So I'm not by any means, I'm working harder now. I get up every day and work dawn to dusk, just like I was when on the road. It's just the difference is that I'm not speaking every night to people. So one of the things you'll also notice is that I've started live streaming, and I've got some premium accounts now on Twitter and Facebook, and so I can live stream to those locations, and I'm going to start putting out more material and interviewing important people just because you need to know what's going on. So anyway, that. It's a little bit of a transition for me, but things are going well, and I had a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody else did too. So, okay, I guess I should get into this, huh? Stop rambling on. I don't know. It's sort of like a reunion with friends, so it's like I just want to talk with you and sit down and have a bourbon or something. But anyway, let's dig into this. Hey, it's good to be with you. I've been working really hard on this, you guys. And I've been going back over all my material and gleaning out what I think is still relevant, and then I've added a bunch of new stuff, and I'll go over that tonight. So my outline, essentially, for tonight, I'm going to summarize where we are. And a little bit of introduction for people who haven't heard my past a little bit, not much. A little bit of history, not as much as I usually give, because I think most of people here know me. And then I want to remind everybody that even though we won the election, we're still under tyranny. And that's only one election. That's just the top of the ticket. There's a lot of down ballot stuff that we have to deal with. And then I want to show you my national analysis and walk you through that a little bit. So that way you'll see the way I appraise ourselves at this point. Okay. And then I'm going to just summarize where we need to go. And of course, we need reform at all levels. And we still need election reform. People think that we've reformed our elections. People come up to me all the time. Thanks for all your work, Dr. Frank. You fixed the elections, and now everything's good. Oh man, our elections are less safe now than they were then. We need reform at all levels, and elections are key. That's an important principle. And then I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'm going to tell you how to get there. And basically, it boils down to is we the people. And basically, the reason we're in the mess we're in is because we have not been being we the people. We've been asleep at the wheel, asleep at our duties. And so I'm going to review quickly the 7 steps, which I've been teaching everybody around the country. Those turn out to be a core strategy that is working around the country, and it's a new strategy and tactics that we've been using all around the country. And those of you who know me know that I could talk for hours and hours and ends. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour, and then that way there's time at the end for you guys to have questions. And so let me just jump into my introduction to history. Ironically, I was conceived in Shasta County, California, Northern California, and I was born and raised down near San Francisco. And then I went to school in Santa Barbara, and I've been living out in Ohio since 1996. And I moved out to Ohio because the governor there set me up with a magnificent laboratory. I was part of the Ohio Eminent Scholar Program. I was a physicist, a young, budding professor. I was all excited about being a scientist in my life. And after 10 years in academics, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to leave. But anyway, so I moved out to Ohio. So if you want to know where I am, I'm here in Ohio, and it was a beautiful, brisk day today, about 20 degrees out, and a dusting of snow on the ground. Just lovely outside. Nice, clear, crystal sky. I got a few leaves to rake still. All right. Anyway, so I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in surface electroanalytical chemistry. I have 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications, which means I'm a real scientist. I have cover articles on the leading journals in the world, Science, Nature, Naturwissenschaften. I got to do that because I had an amazing laboratory, and I got to do some really amazing work. So I'm a real scientist. I'm a real physicist. Behind me, I have a lab. It's an electronics lab where I build custom electronics. I came home and I had to build some to make some money so I can pay the bills. As I've been on the road for so many years, I didn't have any income, so I had to make some money to help me pay the bills this year. But anyway, my wife has a job, so that's been working okay for us as long as people helped me out on the road and they covered my expenses, which they did. So I'm about even after 4 years. So thanks everybody for helping me on that. I'm expecting to be traveling some more and probably follow the same paradigm. So anyway, let's move on. I mentioned I was from Ohio, and Springfield, just around the corner from where I live, and everybody, of course, heard about Springfield, of course, because after the debate, everybody, heard about the dogs leaving Springfield because they were worried about them being eaten, but there's nothing to worry. Even then, Trump was on the job. He was there rescuing the pets and rescuing the animals, and I'm sure once he's in office, he'll continue that, but don't you worry. So he was on the job. Anyway, speaking of where I was conceived, Shasta County, boy, there's a lot going on there. And on one of my recent live streams, I interviewed Patrick Jones and Patty Plum. They're awesome patriots up there. Patrick Jones is really the catalyst for government reform there, and Patty Plum, she's really the catalyst for the public movement. It's just amazing to work with those people. I've been there multiple times, spoken to their county commissioners and whatnot, the supervisors, they call them there. If you haven't seen my interview of them to find out what's going on, man, what a debacle they have there. You can see, you can follow me on my live streaming. I've got it on my Rumble channel. I've got it on my YouTube channel, that interview, and you can find out the details of what's going on with their election up there. It's quite a mess. Basically, it boils down to these machines that always work so much better than people couldn't read the ballots because the ballots had too much overspray on them, and it generated this whole cascade of problems, a domino effect of problems, and boy, they've got to fix it. So anyway, it's pretty exciting what's going on in there. People always say, well, how did you get involved in this, Dr. Frank? This is a long story, but I'm going to keep it really short tonight. Basically, after the 2020 election, Doug Mastriano asked for an audit of the elections in Pennsylvania. And Kathy Barnett over there in Montgomery County, she asked me to look at her election. She'd met me during COVID because she was a politician running for office, and I was modeling COVID around the country. I had 150,000 unique visitors to my websites during COVID because I was graphing all the COVID epidemics around the country, county by county in 30 different countries. I was just using first order differential equations. I love math. I love science. I love modeling. And I've been modeling elections for 40 years. So it was a natural for them to bring me in. Anyway, so I started working on their election. I brought all that information to the legislature, fully expecting the legislature to say, oh my goodness, look at all this fraud. We got to fix this. And lo and behold, was my first major lesson in politics. Just because they have an R in front of their name doesn't mean they care about the same things I care about. Really, I'm not an R. Really, I'm a libertarian in my heart. I usually end up voting R, though. And I certainly voted for Trump both times. All 3 times. But anyway, so Doug Mastriano, he asked for the audit. And I always like to bring up at this point, do you realize for him asking for the audit, what it cost him? And a lot of people don't realize because he asked for the audit, he lost his staff, lost his office. As far as I know, he lost his parking space. In other words, he was a casualty of caring about election integrity and wanting to do something about it. He's not the only one. He was basically removed from every committee. Now think about that. He's a Republican state senator and a Republican majority legislature, and that's the way they treat him. That was an eye-opener to me. I had to learn. That was a shock to me to discover how that ours are not necessarily ours. Well, I just want to summarize something else here. He's not the only one. We've had multiple other casualties. Just let me listen. I mean, this is a war we're in, and I feel like I'm going down the war remembrance or something. Adrienne Southworth in Kentucky, brilliant legislator, state senator there. They basically removed her. They removed her by redistricting her out of office. The Republicans in her state got rid of her because she's an election integrity advocate. Same thing happened to Tatum Lee in Kansas. Well, wait a minute, Dr. Frank, Kansas and Kentucky are conservative states. How could that be? Yeah, and then we got Dave Eastman up in Alaska, one of the most conservative, consistent, constitutionally sound people I've met in my life, and the Republicans removed him. Same thing with Tim Rentham in Wisconsin. So we've lost some of our best election integrity advocates. So when people think, oh, gee, Dr. Frank, we've done all this great stuff going forward. Anybody who's wanted to really fix the elections, they've taken out. And these are just 4 casualties. Everybody knows about Tina Peters by now, I hope. And she's obviously a casualty. She's in jail. If you haven't seen her, she's been broadcasting now from jail on Frank's Speech. So feel free to watch her there. I've been on a couple of podcasts with her, and she's in good spirits. What a sweetheart she is. Gold Star mom, Gold Star patriot. But she's doing time right now. Everybody asks me, well, gee, is Trump going to get her out? Well, not officially, I don't think. But I think he will unofficially. Probably pull a few strings because her cases and her convictions were state convictions, not federal. But something tells me that isn't the way politics works anyway. I've learned a lot since I started this work. You know, as a physicist, you follow data, you make predictions, you make models, and you're logical and rational, and you think that that's the way that the world works, but that's not the way politics works. The way the politics really works is by influence and control, and I think that the Oval Office just might have a few strings it can pull to get Tina Peters out of her trouble. Wait, but back to Pennsylvania. So after we exposed a lot of that stuff and showed it to them, I was expecting we were going to fix Pennsylvania. I was wrong. I did multiple other conservative states. None of them want to fix their elections either. And by March of the end of February of 2021, the Supreme Court rejected our cases from Montgomery County. And so Kathy Barnett gave up. She said, I give up, Dr. Frank. But I met Mike Lindell, and Mike Lindell is still all interested in elections. And sure enough, I got introduced to him, and he made a movie about me. And there's a funny saying from that first movie, that ain't natural, buddy, that kind of caught on. And I think that's ended up being, for all the math and analysis I've done, that's probably the most important phrase that I could have said. And basically what it boiled down to was everybody knew something was wrong with the election. That ain't natural. Something's wrong with it. But the math was what I was using to show how they were wrong. And I was going around the country teaching everybody math, thinking that's how it's going to fix the country. Because back in those days, Mike and I and a lot of us in the movement thought that all we needed was good evidence, and we could win the hearts and minds of the politicians, and they'd want to fix it, but we were wrong. So that first movie, Scientific Proof, was about an hour long. If you haven't seen it, it's still fun to watch. I enjoy watching it. In fact, I popped popcorn recently and watched it because it was fun to watch Mike. He's learning the math for the first time, and he gets all excited, as Mike does. Another 30 minutes of that interview was in his third documentary, Absolute Proof. That was his first documentary, and his second was Scientific Proof, and then he did Absolute Interference. Another 30 minutes was in that one. And then we were all thinking we could fix the country because all we had to do is get the evidence in front of the Supreme Court. Nope, wasn't going to happen. But that's the way we were all operating in 2021. We all thought we could fix it from the top down. All we needed to do is get the right evidence in front of the right people. Boy, were we wrong. But we had to learn that lesson. It took us a while. I got to give the keynote speech for President Trump at his first rally in Wellington, Ohio. It was an exciting day for me. I got to basically speak to the world about how they were stealing our elections. And I really believed at that time that all I had to do was just get the word out there, and people would understand and say, we got to fix this. Our elections are a wreck. Boy, was I naive, and boy, was I wrong. It was an exciting day. I got to present to the world. And I remember the next day, people posted memes about me. Dr. Frank, make math great again. And I thought, gee, I'm winning this battle. I'm teaching people math, and we're winning the battle because of that. The New Yorker didn't think so. Everything I said was confusing to them, I guess. But that was my paradigm at the beginning, was teaching math to everybody, and I started going around the country. Of course, I met everybody. I spent all that time, over 100,000 people I met in person. I gave over 650 public presentations. Of course, those presentations evolved over time because I was learning and applying local data. I always included somebody's local data in my local presentation so that they would understand, what was going on. And because of all that travel and around the country, I forgot. Everybody always says, what are the two states you haven't been to, Dr. Frank? And everybody always assumes Alaska is one of them. Are you kidding? I've been there 3 times. Alaska is an important state. But Hawaii, I was invited, but it was the week of my son's wedding, so I couldn't make it. And then Mississippi, for some reason, hasn't had me. But all the other states I've been to multiple times. It's been quite an adventure. I've really got a good feeling for the way our country thinks and acts, and good feeling for the different culture everywhere. All right, so because of that, Sean Smith called me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity. I like that. It caught on. A lot of newspaper articles called me that and everything, and I'm tickled by that, actually. If you saw the Cyber Symposium, I was the MC for that, and that's when Tina Peters first came out in public. I had met with her in April of 2021. I'll tell you about that in just a second, just to kind of catch up on her. And then, of course, the trial of the machines a year later. So I want you to notice that there's a migration here. First, we were focused on our evidence, on our data. Then we were moving to the systems and the machines. And by 2023, we're talking about down to the grassroots, providing support for the grassroots. So Mike was learning right alongside of the rest of us how we need to address these problems. And it's why he set up Cause of America. And so I'm glad to be with you guys. Cause of America is called tonight. If you haven't already been supporting Mike, please support Mike. He needs the money. He needs the support. Now, Christmas is coming up, so go on MyPillow and buy stuff. But when you go on MyPillow, use my promo code. And I'm not telling you to use my promo code because I get any money. I don't get any money for it. I've set it up so that if you use this promo code, Mike gets all of the commissions. So if you're trying to help Mike, use the Dr. Frank promo code. If you want to help Seth or War Room or one of the other people, you can use their promo codes. But if you're trying to help Mike, use the Dr. Frank promo code. That's where you get the most help directly to him. So anyway, there's one other thing I've been promoting, and I just want to give a few seconds to that, and it's peaceofheaven.life. Peaceofheaven.life. It's a wonderful organization I've met in California, and I've been promoting them around the country. They're setting up right now a beautiful facility to care for children that have been child trafficked. So there's two things you can support for Christmas. One, buy stuff for Mike and maybe set up a monthly donation for Peace of Heaven. That's the last ad you're going to get tonight. Sorry about that. I just feel like I need to promote them. But anyway, I like the way, and to kind of wrap up my introduction, I like the way Patrick Byrne described me in April, almost a year ago now. He said, Dr. Frank reverse engineered the algorithms they're using to cheat our elections. I thought that was a really good way of describing what I do. I love data. I love immersing myself in data and then reverse engineering how it all came together. And so that's basically what that was. But then he also said something very important and very relevant to this discussion tonight. He said there are a dozen tools in their cheating toolbox, and they use whichever combination of tools works best in every situation. So in other words, there are about a dozen ways to cheat our elections, and they'll use whatever there. So you'll hear states all excited, like in this election, Georgia was all excited. Oh, we're going to count the ballots. Okay, well, yeah, but that's just one of 12 of the tumors. There's a lot of tumors. So it's like I call it tumors because you imagine you go to the doctor and he says you've got a dozen tumors and they're only going to take out one of them. Well, you didn't really fix the problem, did you? The guy's going to be in trouble. And you got to take them all out or you're dead. And that's our basic problem with our elections is there's too many ways to cheat them with the system. We need to tighten them up. And the only way you're going to be able to tighten them up is to take local control. And so that's what I've been teaching people how to do. Unfortunately, people aren't doing things that are very productive. I feel as I travel the country that everybody's on hamster wheels. They're doing a lot of things like trying to register people to vote, or like trying to clean the voter rolls, or like chasing ballots. They're doing a lot of things like that, but those are not effective things, and I'll try to convince you of that. So I like what Einstein said about that. He said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So I don't want you guys to keep doing the wrong things. I want you to do the right things. And what do I mean by the right things? Because I'm so smart that I can figure that out? No. I've made all the same mistakes you guys have. But different about me than most of you is that I'm doing this every day of my life, and I've done it all around the country with thousands and thousands of people. So I've learned what doesn't work, and I've learned what does work. So I'm scraped up all this wisdom, and I can share that with you, and I'm delighted to do that. Okay. So today I really want to change your mindset. I want to change the way you think about election integrity, change the way to think about your role in election integrity. And basically it boils down to this. You got to think of it like we're in a war, and you got to act like this is a war, because it is a war. And so the first thing I want you to do in this war is to form a local team. I mean, you're getting connected now. This is important. I always tell people the first step is to get connected, but I'll come back to that later. In a war, it's not all about one person fighting the war. It can't be about Dr. Frank comes to your county and saves the day. It can't be about some local activist coming to your county and save the day. It has to be a team. You need a war council. You win a war when you're about to fight a war, not by giving everybody a gun and running at the enemy. When you win a war, you form a war council. You make a strategy. Where are we strong? Where are we weak? Where is the enemy strong? Where is the enemy weak? What strategy are we going to use to get point A to point B? That's the most important thing. If you hang up this call now and walk away, I want you to remember this point. You got to form a local team. If you don't have a local team, you're not going to succeed. You can't do it alone. You know, I love Linda Ranch. She's there in Missouri. She's on the call tonight. She's been working so hard teaching everybody how to hand count. But you know what? She's one person. You got to have a team. You're not going to be successful without a team. All right. So, and then once you have that team, you're going to use that team to engage your community in the war. And our biggest enemy in this war is that the people are uninformed and apathetic. And I was with General Flynn recently at one of his big events. You know, he's been promoting his movie. And somebody asked him a question. And they said, well, what happens if the election has cheating in it or something like that? General Flynn, and he said, the people are just going to sit on their hands. And he actually sat on his hands on a stool to show everybody. In other words, and the reason he says that is because the pain level just isn't high enough. People are too comfortable. And that's really our problem. We're the frogs in the pot. And for decades here, we've just kind of become so comfortable letting other people run the government, letting other people teach our children. That's the problem. We got to wake up and to re-engage our civic responsibilities. And a lot of people are just not going to wake up until the pain level is higher. So guess what? That team you're about to form, Your job is to wake up your community and get them to engage. Now, of course, like if you want to tune in and follow the Shasta County stuff, that's exactly what's happening. It's quite an exciting battle going on there. So they're awake. Boy, are they awake. And they're awake in other places too. I'm just bringing that because there's hot stuff happening there today. So anyway, that's kind of an introduction of where I'm taking you today. Of course, the problem is where we are as a country right now is we are under tyranny, my friends. We are under tyranny. There's lawfare going against us. There's corruption throughout all phases of government, in our courts, in our legislature. Wow, we're under tyranny. I remember when I met with Tina Peters back in 2021, and I remember her telling me when I met with her in her office, I said, we need to do backups of your systems. And she says, whoa, if this becomes public, the County Clerks Association is going to come down on me a load of bricks. And boy, was she right about that. But it wasn't just that. It was also the entire legal system and the governor and the Secretary of State. You are not allowed to question the integrity of elections in this country if you're an official. We are under tyranny. And that is not an acceptable way. Now, you know that in August, it came out public in August of 2021 at the Cyber Symposium. If you haven't seen her story, you really need to see it. It's selectioncode.com. You need to see that story. It's about an hour long. You can find out what's going on with her. Because I was involved in that, Mr. Lindell was involved in getting the backups as well. The FBI took my phone, and I was talking to Michelle today about it, and the FBI has still not given me back my phone, which means that that investigation is still ongoing. And I don't know, one of these days maybe they'll give it back to me. Anyway, so we've been characterized around the country as a group of conspiracy theorists. And at first they tried to paint Tina Peters as a victim. But no, she was a patriot. She knew there was something wrong with their elections, and she stepped up and started looking into it. And she never intended to be in public. And, during her sentencing, I testified October 3rd. If you haven't seen that, my 10-minute, I gave a 10-minute, very short testimony. I had to read kind of fast. If you haven't seen that, you should go to my YouTube channel and watch that and see that 10 minutes of my summary of her whole situation. It's really tragic the way the judge treated her and what's happened. And honestly, that's another area where I was very naive. I was telling everybody there's no way that Tina Peters would ever go to trial, because if she went to trial, they'd have to put all the evidence into court. And the evidence included the fact that all our machines had modems and were online during the elections. We have all the evidence. We were and I always told people they're never going to let her go to trial. What they did is during the trial, they kept out all of the exculpatory evidence, the evidence that would have exonerated her actions. And so basically she's a victim. She's a victim of this war and a victim of this tyranny. So anyway, if you haven't seen that, that's my YouTube channel. Or you can catch up with her on Truth Matters on Frank's Speech. She does that podcast pretty regularly, and she's been podcasting from prison as well. So you can keep up with her there. And I'll just finish this section by just reminding you what Jefferson said about tyranny. He said, when governments fear the people, there's liberty. When governments fear the people, there's liberty. When the people fear the government, there's tyranny. And as I've been traveling the country and meeting with clerks and election officials, I will tell you over and over again, once we find fraud, the clerks panic, just like the Colorado Secretary of State panicked, just like various election officials around the country when I meet with them, they panic. They're afraid of the government, okay? In fact, a lot of the clerks would say to me, Dr. Frank, I don't want to come forward with that evidence because I don't want to be Tina Petered. They would actually say that. So when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. We are under tyranny right now, my friends. Even though we won that election at the top, we didn't win a lot of the elections down ballot, and we are under tyranny still. Jefferson said the strongest reason for the people to retain and keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against the tyranny in government. The whole purpose of the Second Amendment wasn't so we could go hunting. It was to defend ourselves against the government. So anyway, that's an important principle. We are under tyranny. And so before I leave that concept, just would remind you all, make sure your militias are tuned up. I think we have some interesting times in our near future.